Albrecht on this Tuesday edition. It is pre-recorded. Katherine Albrecht, who I believe, if I recollect, I first learned about on an Alex Jones documentary, Loose Change, or one of his documentaries, and you were talking about the RFID chips. And and they were putting them on packages, like without your knowledge, so that they know what you purchase. And then lastly, I saw you at the Liberty Forum this past February up in New Hampshire, and you were talking about they're putting them on children, they want them in the schools, and this one girl who refused, and she was taking them to court because she refused to walk around with this, I forget exactly what it was. It was some kind of an electronic monitor device. And so now, recently, you've been talking about how they want this woman that has chips that they want you to swallow them.
Yeah, well, Katherine, first of all, it's great to be your guest on Organic Radio News here, and I've got a long history of working on this topic of RFID. I've been a privacy advocate since 1999, and in 2003, I switched my focus from consumer privacy in the retail space to really looking closely at RFID tags and trying to really see the kind of impact that this technology would have. And they, as you pointed out, originally were putting these on consumer products. They wanted it to replace the barcode. And what an RFID tag is: radio frequency identification. It's tiny microchips hooked up to miniature antennas that can transmit information wirelessly using electromagnetic radiation or radio waves. So they can pass information through your purse or your pocket, through your shopping bag, or even through walls. And retailers and consumer manufacturers like Walmart and Procter & Gamble were actually using them to spy on customers in a way that was pretty disturbing. So we fought back against that. Then there was the Spychips Corporation, which I think its other name was Digital Angel. It had a bunch of different names, but people probably know it as the Spychips. Were promoting this as something you could inject into a person, just like in a dog or a cat. It's the same technology.
Nice.
That would enable that person to be scanned just like a barcoded package of meat, to basically transmit a unique ID number. The ones that go into flesh only have about a 6-inch read range, though, so they're terrifying, they're horrible, and they reduce you to a number, but they are not trackable by satellites, at least not yet. And then in this last just couple of months, a woman named Regina Dugan, who is the former head of DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Project Administration, which is this very creepy research arm of the U.S. military that works on things like, surveillance spiders and dragonflies with cameras on board and just very disturbing stuff. They, the head of that administration, Regina Dugan, left DARPA and took a job with Google as the head of Motorola. And of course, Motorola is Google's attempt to get every person to have a Google device in their hands, because if you have an Android operating system Motorola phone in your hands, then you're basically carrying Google with you everywhere you go. And at a recent conference, Regina Dugan actually sat up on a stage and she showed us two very disturbing things. One was an RFID tattoo on her arm.
Oh, boy.
And it sounds a little creepier than it was. It was actually a sticker, but it shows you the direction that they want to go. This was a sticker that contained all the circuitry and the microchip to enable a person to have this RFID implant on the top of their skin instead of inside of them. And then she said something even weirder. She held out a handful of pills, and she said, well, what you could do is you could take vitamin authentication and actually swallow the RFID pill into your body. And the way it would work, it's an RFID microchip with its antenna. It is encapsulated so that you swallow it, and then the coating dissolves away. And when the stomach acid in your digestive tract makes contact with, the device, it powers it. I don't know if you've ever done in school, like where you take a lemon and you stick 2 wires into it and you can power, a little light bulb or something. So you can actually power things using that acidic reaction. And so the idea is now you've got this in your stomach and it's powered by this chemical reaction with the juices, the digestive juices.
Wow.
And as it makes its way through your body, here's the part that's really disturbing, it actually turns your body into an antenna. So now your very flesh is transmitting your unique ID number. It's transmitting through every inch of surface area of your body. And so what Regina Dugan says is, you swallow this and your arms become antennas and your hands become alligator clips. And everything you touch, like when you go to log on to your Motorola phone, for example, when you touch your phone, you're transmitting that unique ID number from the microchip in your stomach, and you're transmitting it all through your body and onto your phone. And that would be, instead of a password, it would actually be your body serves as your password or your authentication. And that's why she calls it vitamin authentication.
Why, and like, how are they selling this to the public? I mean, of course it's under this guise of terrorism in some way. Well,
it's interesting. I don't think that they've yet gone public with this. You've got to kind of understand what DARPA is. DARPA is really a future-looking research arm of the military. And so a lot of the things that they do involve, cloning and finding ways to help soldiers not have to sleep for weeks on end, or finding ways to create remote control rats, that you actually have real live rats and you can take a joystick and make them move left or right. So DARPA really is, you could call them on the very cutting edge, or you could call them on the very creepy edge. But a lot of what they do is not really intended for the general public. And I think in this case, obviously, Google and Motorola create products intended for the general public. And so a remote-controlled rat would be a remote control rat. Well, that would not be something you'd probably want to buy, but vitamin authentication might be something that you would. So they haven't come out with it yet. They have received FDA approval on the device. They've partnered with the company that makes them, which has, received approval to begin selling it.
And how do they get
now it's just a question of whether they can get people to be interested in buying it.
Right, and right. So that how would they sell that to the public? How would they get people? I mean, I know that, I hate to sound so cynical, but it's probably not that hard to get people to want this stuff if they just.
Well, that's the depressing part.
Yeah.
She actually said, as far as the tattoo goes, that it's difficult to get young people, and I guess by that she meant people in their teens, 20s, maybe early 30s. It's difficult to get young people to wear a watch. And, originally that was their plan, was to put the tracking technology into a wristwatch. She said, but now, with this RFID tattoo, that you could get people to, young people to, flock to this product and totally love it, if for no other reason than to upset, she used the word pee off, I won't use the word, but, their parents. So, she was basically saying that the way to get people on board is to paint this tracking technology, this surveillance enslavement technology, basically, as a cool way to rebel against your parents.
And then obviously then you don't need parental consent in order to, for them to have this.
Right. And actually that's an interesting point you raised, Catherine, because I authored legislation that was introduced in a number of states. You can actually find it at antichips.com, called the Bodily Integrity Act. And what that legislation is, it's a single-sided, one-sheet piece of paper. It's very straightforward. It's written in plain English, and it protects people against having microchips required for anything implanted in your body, required for employment or implanted in, people for whatever reason. It also forbids anyone under 18 from ever receiving one. And that even with parental permission, it's not appropriate. We don't allow, this is a dangerous technology, first of all. We don't allow children to smoke. We don't allow children to enlist or enroll in the military. Our society has some pretty tight restrictions on alcohol, all of which are designed to protect young people from poor decisions that they might make before they reach full maturity. And really the whole concept of, saying that you cannot implant a microchip into yourself until you're 18, I think makes sense.
And so with these, the tattoos or these remote controlled rats, are they using that technology like in the military on soldiers or anything like that? I mean, it's hard to know. I'm not aware of any direct programs that are doing that, so it's difficult to say. We've certainly heard a lot of rumors about soldiers being implanted with microchips, but I've never actually seen any hard evidence that I found convincing enough to believe. So I don't think it's coming yet. I think that now that she's left DARPA and left the U.S. military and is now working for the private sector, working for Google as the head of Motorola, I think that now they're going to be looking at consumer-facing products. And so her challenge is going to be how to take this very, cutting edge and many would say extremely disturbing technology and find a market for it or convince the general public that this is something that would be useful or valuable to them. And, that sounds like a big stretch. How would you get somebody to be willing to swallow, basically a device that turns you into a walking antenna beaming out a number? That sounds pretty 1984 or, pretty surveillance heavy. And especially knowing what we know about the NSA now, I can't imagine that anybody would knowingly want to do that. On the other hand, if they can find the killer app, the thing that just makes everybody really want it, right,
then, 10 years ago, who would have thought that, 80-90% of Americans would be walking around with a portable GPS tracking device in their hands all day long. And yet we do that because it's the cell phone and because of all the cool things that they've packed into it and the cool things that we can do with it. Not only do we accept being tracked all the time with this handheld tracking device, which is really just a portable jailer. Not only do we accept it, but we pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars for the privilege, and we pay a monthly fee to do it.
Isn't that crazy?
So it's pretty clever how they can, take something that normally they couldn't pay you enough money to agree to and turn the tables and get you to pay them to have the, quote, privilege of doing it.
And even if, I'm sure they would find a way to create a situation that would make people want it. I mean, even if they had to do that, even if they had to, orchestrate some event or, whatever, it was in order to get people to want this. Yeah,
I think they found over time, though, that it's much more effective to have a carrot than a stick. You can provide a stick in the form of, some horrible disaster that happens, or you can take advantage, as members of our government have famously said, never let a good disaster go to waste.
Right.
You can take advantage of natural disasters. You can take advantage of wars and dark things and difficult things that happen in people's lives to scare them into compliance, like they've done in the airports with the nakedizing machine.
Right.
That, millions of people have gone through and allowed the government to actually see them naked. Who would have thought we would ever consent to that?
Right.
So that's the stick method, which is really frightening people of some external boogeyman to such an extent that they comply to your surveillance tactics. And then there's the carrot method, which is more the smartphone method, which is where they instead entice you with something cool and fun. And I would say it's not only the smartphone method, it's also the Facebook method, where, here's this wonderful place where I have, huge jolts of adrenaline and endorphins, of actual addictive chemicals flowing through my brain. And it's people can't wait to get onto Facebook to reveal more personal information about themselves. So a lot of that is psychology. People don't realize that checking your email or checking your Facebook or, reviewing your online status on all of these various services is almost as addictive as heroin. When they actually look at what gamblers who are addicted to gambling, and they go to Vegas and they just gamble away everything they have, and they can't stop even though they know it's harming them. They can look at their brains and see that the pleasure center and the addiction centers in their brains are going crazy as they do their gambling. Well, they've also found that internet users, and not just heavy ones, but pretty much all of us, have a similar response inside of our brains when we interact with these technologies. And so when that's happening, even, if we liken it to Vegas, when you're in Vegas and you're playing the slots and you're watching your rent money go up in smoke, there's a part of you that goes, that's really terrible. I'm harming myself. And yet the brain is so entranced and addicted to the process that you can't stop, even though you see what it's doing to you.
Yeah, it's funny.
And I think society now is in that position with these technologies. We're so entranced that even though we see that our privacy and our autonomy and even our futures are going up in smoke, we can't stop ourselves.
I mean, isn't it funny? Well, not funny, but that, so then our government is not our government. I mean, it's not there, for the people, obviously not like it's supposed to be. And then, so at the same time, while we are being surveilled and we are being followed and monitored all the time, people can still have this reluctance to want to believe that their government would ever, do anything that's not in their best interest, or would ever do anything to harm them, or, I mean, even when the evidence is pretty clear that it in fact would and is,
Yeah, I think there's a lot of psychological elements to that, and I actually have a doctorate from Harvard University in human development and psychology, so I've spent a lot of time trying to understand how it is that people think about these things and how they navigate them, and why we find ourselves in these relationships with power. And for one thing, when you hear about remote-controlled spiders from DARPA, you kind of cross yourself and hope that you never encounter one, and that's about it. When you hear about these things happening with corporations, then I think there's a tendency to want to say, oh yeah, but Facebook would never hurt me. Facebook is my friend. I love Facebook. I just see that logo and I get warm, addictive endorphin fuzzies in my brain. They would never hurt me. Yeah. Or Google. It's the beautiful colors and the happy logo and the funny name, and they'd never do anything to harm me. And so we're really turning over our data not to the government, but we're turning over our data to these companies. Right. That feels like a less threatening trade-off for us to be making, I think, for most people, because, Google doesn't have tanks and guns, and Facebook doesn't have soldiers in uniform. So we kind of think, well, how bad can it really be? These are just companies. The worst they could do is, I don't know, sell my data to some marketers, but a lot of people don't care about that.
So would you say that
where this becomes...
Would you say that the government has been taken over by the corporations, and that we really don't have a government?
No, I don't think that's the case. I think it's almost the other way around, where the data that's being collected by the corporations is then, once the corporations have done the dirty work of convincing you to turn over all of your personal information, then the government says, we want a piece of that pie, so let us in. And that's really what you're seeing through the NSA. And, a lot of us predicted this 10 years ago, when, really saying, if we provide all of our personal information into these private sector databases, that information is going to hang like low-hanging fruit that will be almost irresistible to government to swoop in and get a hold of. And so I think that, we saw it coming. But it's not so much that you're giving information to the government than it is that you're voluntarily surrendering information to the 9 big prison companies. Microsoft with Bing and Outlook and all of its, online products that, millions of people, most of the country uses something or other by Microsoft at some point. And then you've got Yahoo, which millions of people use, AOL, Skype.
And so what is their end goal? What is the ultimate reason for doing all of this?
Well, I think there's really two pieces. The companies just want to make money. And I always say that, when people ask me, who would spy on your RFID tag? I say there are three groups of people who would do that. They're marketers who simply want to know more about you so that they can extract more money from your pocket voluntarily. They're not holding you up at gunpoint. But that's really what they want. They want your money. And so marketers are the first, I think, to come into these surveillance technologies. Then you've got the people who really do want to hold you up at gunpoint, who are the hackers and criminals, and they certainly gravitate to this kind of information. And then finally, you've got the government, which wants this information to maintain the status quo. And, governments throughout all of history and across all of the globe, their goal is always to maintain the status quo and further their own ends. Because the best definition of government I've ever come up with is a group of people who sought power over others and found a way to get it. That's really what they are. They're not they're not parents. They're not endowed by God with any kind of special, desire to serve humanity for the most part. They're people who truly wake up in the morning and want to control other people. And, I have to say, of all the people who should not be controlling other people, it's probably the people who most desire that and who built their whole lives after being able to do it. So we've always had, throughout all of history, these governments, people at the, quote, top who want to advance themselves. They want to advance their power. They want to advance their income.
And it's
they
such
want to advance their influence.
Yeah.
And this enables them to do it.
And it's such a, I call it like carbon monoxide. I think of carbon monoxide that's, odorless and colorless. And it just is sort of, seeping its way into every part of your life or your house or whatever, and you just, you don't necessarily, notice it, you can't smell it, but yet it's overtaking you. I was a psych major. I've been studying about, especially, just dysfunctional, abusive, unhealthy relationships, my entire life, and a lot of health and fitness things. I've always been studying alternative healing kind of thing. And, like pretty early on, I got into this stuff, meditation and things like that, pretty much like decades ago. And I always kind of felt like I was moving in a bit of the opposite direction as other people, but I never really realized that it was to the extent that it was, today. Like, I never thought, I thought people, kind of knew things. Like, I thought that they knew, kind of better than me, and I was just like learning this stuff.
We keep thinking, those of us who have woken up, who are awake, we keep thinking if only everybody just knew, then we could solve this problem. And the reality is, first of all, you don't need everybody to know to solve anything. Margaret Mead had a wonderful quote that it does not take a majority, to solve, to change the world. All it takes is a committed minority, and that's the only thing that ever has changed the world. So you don't need everybody on board, but let's say we did have everybody on board. The example that I always bring up is all of the countries that were under the oppression of the Soviet Union through the dark ages of the Cold War. During that time, people in Romania and Poland and Lithuania and other countries, 100% of them knew that their government was corrupt.
Right.
They all knew. There was no waking up that had to happen, and yet they were even more oppressed than we are. So merely waking up is not the solution. Going out and trying to wake up your neighbors is not the answer to the problem. The answer to the problem is mobilizing the people who have already woken up and then coming up with constructive solutions to try to do something about this.
And a lot of times
I think that there's a place for all of us. There's certainly a place for the educators and the megaphones to go out and tell people, but I think there's an even bigger place for people who are willing to just roll up their sleeves and get to work, even if their neighbors and coworkers and family members have no idea why they're doing it.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes trying to wake people up actually creates the opposite effect. If you push them, like a muscle, sometimes if you push them a little bit too much too soon, like they're just gonna kind of get tight and then fight you back. I mean, it's all about.
That's a beautiful analogy. I love that. I'm going to use that if I may.
Oh, sure. No, I'm just, I always went in the direction of like health. Like, I mean, what's real? I mean, to me, money was never real. So I never really went in that direction because, I felt that you have to develop your skills. You have to cultivate yourself first. And then, money will come. Like, it should come secondary to going after what you believe in first, so it was kind of this natural, you have to have that first. I mean, if you're kind of underdeveloped and your skills and talents are underdeveloped and you're going after money, you have no leverage with money if you are underdeveloped yourself and your talents and your knowledge is underdeveloped. Then, right, it's like money is going to have this leverage and you're going to be in this never-ending treadmill. I had that sense like so early that the direct, I always use fitness metaphors. I just, can't help it because so you want to, right, like build your muscle first, and that only comes from nature. And so when you build that first, then muscle burns fat. But if you're chasing after, right, the fake stuff, the man-made stuff, it's like being fat. And then it's so much harder to burn fat when you don't have the muscle first. And that's like the trap that I feel like a lot of people are caught in. Like they have so much kind of, mental cellulite because they haven't, they themselves, right, they don't have the knowledge, they don't have the, and the know-how. And then, once you get, you gain too much weight, it's much harder to lose it later on.
Those are all really, I think, accurate and interesting analogies because, you get to the point where you are so enmeshed in the system that even if you begin to recognize that maybe the system isn't so great, you can't get out of it. I mean, there are so many people who work for these companies whose jobs consist of surveilling other people or marketers whose whole worldview is about how can I get more data on them without them knowing, and how can I get them to contribute more and trick them, into telling me more, because that's the way their whole business is run. And one of the prayers that I often pray is, Lord, please help the people who are on the wrong road and contributing to these things. Open a window for them, open a door for them, change their circumstances and give them an alternative so that they don't have to do this terrible stuff to other people. And that's a big part of it too. When you see people resisting you, it's probably because they have something at stake. Whether it's what's at stake is financial, maybe what's at stake is emotional, maybe what's at stake is their sense of peace. Yeah. That once you wake up, I mean, Solomon in the Bible actually said, with great wisdom and with great knowledge comes great suffering. And it's true. Right. Wasn't it easier when you were just a kid and you didn't know any of this? You just kind of believed that the president was second in line to God and would only, it was an easier world to live in, but it was also a less mature world and it was an inaccurate worldview. And so as we go older, and again, I'm going to come back to the Bible, the Bible says when I was a child, I acted and thought like a child, but now that I'm an adult, I'm putting away childish things. And I think so many Americans don't want to do that. They don't want to wake up and grow up and, get to the next step of their own development, to look around and realize that so much of what they've been told and fed and, convinced of through the media, through just society, is not true. It's not accurate. So then that's a huge challenge. You have to first of all face the crumbling of all your beliefs, which nobody wants to do. And then second of all, you have to develop a new worldview, and you have to really step up to the plate and man up, or woman up as the case may be, and really respond to that challenge. And many people simply don't want to grow up. You know, we want to be Peter Pan and never know it.
Would you say, because like I really liked and agreed in Aaron Russo's Freedom to Fascism, you know, where they talk about, you know, it's deliberate manipulation to want to break the family system down. And I kind of, you know, agreed with that, and that part of the problem, or, you know, a great deal of the problem is the breakdown of the family, and that there are no parents really. And, you know, because I mean, what you're describing, you know, what I'm hearing you say, you know, to me, it just sounds like, you know, right, like what I've heard, and they even talked about it in the State of Mind documentary that just recently came out, you know, the psychology of mind control, about, you know, keeping people in that perpetual state of, you know, just childlikeness or adolescence.
It's infantilization, and the best way to understand it is really to think about domesticated animals. You know, the difference between a cow and a deer is that the cow has been domesticated over thousands of years to become extraordinarily docile and stupid. And its only purpose is, you know, truly to provide humans with ways of exploiting it through taking its milk and its meat. And, you know, I eat meat. I'm not necessarily knocking that, but I am going to say that domestication is all about that. And when you think about, for example, a cat or a dog, the difference between your dog and a wild wolf is that your dog is stuck in a place of perpetual puppyhood.
Right.
See, when dogs are puppies, they're puppies. They're very much like our dogs. They're docile, they're obedient, they want to do what you want them to do, they want to please you, and they look to you to provide them with food. You know, puppies look to their parents. Hey mama, you know, go kill something and feed me, I'm hungry. Right. So when we domesticate animals, what we do is we make them very docile. The last thing we ever want to do is have them, you know, bite or fight back. And we also make them dependent upon us. We make them like children. So your cat looks to you for food, your dog looks to you for food. That's baby behavior in the animal world. That's not adult behavior. No adult wolf or tiger is going to look to anyone else to provide it with food or nourishment or shelter or anything else. And so the fact that we have this history with animals of understanding how to domesticate and infantilize animals truly, I believe, is a model for the domestication and infantilization of human population.
Right.
So if you can get people to become dependent, you know, get them to be kind of slow and stupid, and then get them to be dependent upon you for their very survival. You know, mother, may I please fly on the airplane today? Mother, may I please get a job? That's coming. Right. With this new Immigration Reform Act, one of the pieces of that is you're going to have to beg to the government every time you want to get a job. You're going to have to say, hey, you know, here's my job, and could I please, mother, may I get this job? Would you give me permission to support my family? And the government has the power to say no. So, you know, and this is not just immigrants. This is not just going to be about immigrants. This is ultimately going to be about each one of us. If they don't like us, they can say, no, I'm sorry, you didn't pay the right tax, or you didn't get the right permit to put the deck on the back of your house, or you didn't get the right vaccines for your kids, or you're not eating the right food and paying the right insurance premiums. And then you'll find that you're not able to do anything. And so it's really like your dog. Your dog says, Mommy, can I go outside? I have to pee. You know, what do they do for 14,000 hours with young humans? So for 14,000 hours, they put us in a locked institution called a government school, and then they train us to ask permission to pee.
Yeah, that you just reminded me of Shawshank Redemption. You know, when Red finally gets out, you know, and he's working in the supermarket, and you know, he's always asking the boss, you know, like, restroom break, boss. The guy's like, you don't have to ask me every time you have to go to the bathroom. Just go. Right. And yeah,
but I'll tell you that's exactly what happens to us, because 14,000 hours of your bottom in a seat being acculturated to all of this by a government institution that wants you to be the kind of citizen that they want to have has a profound effect. You know, I dropped out of high school after ninth grade, and I hated high school. I hated being told what to do. I hated having to ask permission to go pee. So I actually wound up moving to Mexico and being a co-host on a TV station, living a whole other life instead, and then starting college when I was 15. Wow. So, you know, to me, that whole mother, may I please, is crazy to me. I've never worked a corporate job. I've always found a way to not have to do that. And I think that's part of it too. I think part of it is just temperament. You know, some of us are really wired to chafe under that yoke, to feel uncomfortable with that kind of institutional control imposed on us. Right. And other people, I think, truly seek it out. I mean, if they don't have it, they look for it, try to find it. Who's going to tell me what to do next? Let me join a cult. You know, let me join whatever, because they seek that, and the government takes advantage of the fact that most human beings are truly, you know, we're social creatures and we follow one another. And that's pretty natural. I think they take advantage of that.
Yeah, I think, you know, maybe that's what happened to me, because I kind of had to grow up pretty early. You know, I had like divorce in my family fairly early. I was on my own quite early, and I got used to, you know, just, you know, really being almost like the parent and raising myself quite early. That, I mean, it did sort of, and, you know, and I did a really good job. I mean, I kind of did know a lot. I mean, you know, I could feel that I was being, you know, conditioned by the system and made to be dependent and not being raised to be independent. Like, you know, like not being raised to fly out of the nest, instead the opposite. Yes. And so, you know,
that's a good way of putting it.
And you know, the thing wasn't, you know, it wasn't an intellectual conscious thing that I just decided one day. You know, it came from my gut. It was just an automatic. You know, I think about, you know, someone not paying attention and stepping off of a sidewalk and twisting their ankle. I mean, your ankle isn't making some conscious decision to swell and get black and blue. It's just something that automatically happens, and that's where it came from for me. It's, you know, it's an automatic thing that comes from nature, you know, and I've always been for so long trying to get people to come back to your instincts. I try to get people, I talk about meditation a lot. That's how I ended up getting this radio show, because, you know, it ended up coming from Facebook. I mean, I was doing the radio show with Danny Schechter. I was actually trying to get you on Danny Schechter's radio show when I was doing that with him. And I would be posting all of these things about, you know, just health and try, you know, empowerment and, you know, like listening to your instincts, like coming back to nature, because, right, the system wants to separate you from nature more and more and more and more. You know, there's a line from the movie Jaws that I think is a really good line that I say every so often. And, you know, it's when Roy Scheider's character says to the other two guys while they're on the boat, and he says, why don't we start leading the shark back to shore instead of him leading us out to sea? Like, to me, like in that movie, that's like the moment of, you know, like the light bulb moment when he realizes that, like, hello, you know, the shark is leading us out into his territory. We should be leading him the other way. And so
that's a great point.
Yeah, so getting more and more separated from our nature. And people don't realize that, and I realized that just early, and you know, fitness was one of the ways that really helped me a lot. Like, exercise, like people don't spend enough time in their bodies, like they're being separated, like everything is being made to be easier and more convenient, and the more you get separated from your body, I mean, that's death right there. I mean, that literally is death. When you are no longer in your own body, that is death. You want to, you know, and a certain amount of challenge, like people turn away from challenge. They turn away from discomfort. And again, exercise is so important because you're going the other way. You're going into the discomfort to a reasonable point. You know, you want to go into the discomfort. You want to go into the truth. You want to face the fact that you're not in shape. You want to face the fact that you don't know things. You want to go the other way and go into some pain, some discomfort, and take your breath with you when you go. You know, just if you can move into the discomfort and take a deep breath at the same time, then at least, you know that you're not getting overwhelmed. You know, like yoga and meditation is all about doing things with your breath. As long as you can, go into your pose and take a deep breath at the same time, you haven't lost yourself. You know, you're doing it not at the expense of yourself, but with, acquiring more of yourself rather than doing it at the expense of yourself. So it's all about doing things with, and that to me is key. If people can just kind of understand, it's not really that complicated, but it just takes practice. It just takes mindfulness. If you get so distracted, right, if the system has you so wrapped up in just, going to work and being a consumer, and then when people have children, sometimes it can be even more of a distraction, and then you lose, it's like you're just losing more and more and more of yourself, which is not good.
Yeah, no, and it's interesting because there's a kind of a dichotomy there, because what the marketers and the manipulators would tell you is it's all about you. Focus on yourself. Hey, you deserve it. Buy a Big Mac. You deserve a break today. It's all this messaging that's all about you, and that gets back to destroying the family. Because if you focus on your needs and yourself, which we're trained to do, really, by it seems paradoxical, but the more you focus on yourself, the less mature you are. Right. And the more you focus on yourself, the more easily manipulated you are, because you're just a whiny little brat who can't handle anything difficult, and because everything's about you. And so I think in that sense too, all of these infantilizing kinds of systems are really designed to keep us navel gazing and focused on our own selves and our own needs and our own whatever. And true maturity is really making sure that you're operating from a position of strength, as you're describing, and then figuring out how to step out and save others. I mean, when I say save others, I don't mean go out and try to convince every single person you know about the truth, because you won't ever be able to do that necessarily, but figure out, how do I just make this world a better place so that others can benefit, and how can my daily actions benefit those around me? And those are challenges. We're never trained to think like that, are we? I mean, they don't teach you that in school. They don't teach you how to wake up in the morning and think, okay, how can I make the world a better place and benefit those around me? I mean, you're not going to get that message. You're going to get, how can I spend more money and get more plastic surgery and become more beautiful and more important and more powerful and have more friends and more money and, more sex appeal. It's all about you. And so I think what you're talking about is a really healthy body attitude, which says, how do I get in my body to develop the strength to operate from a position of health and strength and wholeness, where I'm centered and grounded and not just blown every way the wind goes, so that now I'm strong and healthy in a position to reach out and do the things that really matter.
And relationships are, survival. I mean, we need to have healthy interactions with other people if we're to survive. So if we're thinking of ourselves, we're actually really killing ourselves if we're that self-absorbed. I mean, it's got to be, you got to have an exchange with other people, a healthy exchange with other people in order to sustain yourself. I mean, the family system to me is key. If you don't have a family and healthy interactions, healthy exchanges with like a community even, maybe it doesn't have to even be like a traditional family, but, just a community.
You need people, and Catherine, one of the things that has me so concerned is the skyrocketing rate of mental illness and suicide in our society.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that we're seeing so many suicides because people are isolated. The number one thing that contributes to suicide is the sense of being alone. I was recently reading a New York Times write-up on suicide and the new statistics, and there was a line there that really struck me. It was a suicide note from a man who had jumped off, I think it was the Brooklyn Bridge. He jumped off one of the bridges in New York and killed himself. But in his suicide note that he wrote, as he left his house to walk to this bridge to commit that act, he wrote, "If just one person smiles at me on the way, I won't do it."
Wow.
And of course, he killed himself, and we found the note, so clearly nobody smiled at him on the way. But you know, you turn on the television, and you see, you know, Jersey Shore and Big Brother and all of these horrible television programs that model behavior that if you were to follow that behavior would lead to death. I mean, it truly is. You know, the Bible talks about there's a road that leads to life and a road that leads to death. If you model the behavior that's being shown to you through our culture, it will lead to death. You know, the death metal, the skulls, the leering demons and dragons and things that people put on their clothing and tattoo onto their flesh. All of that is a path that leads to death. That's what does it. And it's being modeled for us everywhere we turn. Nowhere now they stay with you to watch over you and protect you spiritually. And the reason they do that, she was explaining to me, is because when you leave your body and you go out into, you know, wherever you go, your body is empty. And when you come back, you don't always come back alone. And that just sent chills down my spine because I thought about all these people who have reported to me this experience of voices. And so she said that the shamans protect you so that nothing can come back with you. But she said, we think you're all idiots to be sitting around smoking crack and smoking pot and doing whatever without any kind of spiritual protection, because of course you're going to come back, and in a certain percentage of the time you're not going to come back alone. So now let me fast forward to the hypnosis.
Well, that's pretty scary.
What I realized with hypnosis and meditation are both methods of removing yourself from the body. So they're quite similar to all these other things that I talked about, you know, abuse or anesthesia or drug use or, well, I guess the occult is a little bit different, but they're all kind of ways of removing your essence out of your body, removing your soul, your spirit from your body. And I have come to conclude just after talking to thousands of people that it's probably maybe not the healthiest thing to do to engage in a practice that takes you away from your body. And it's interesting because that's what you were just saying is, you know, people aren't in their bodies because they're always off in some other place. And if you tie this all up with a nice bow and bring in the spiritual element, I actually believe that a lot of, you know, you asked me earlier, what's the big picture? Like, you know, who's behind this? And I actually think it's a spiritual battle. That there is a goal afoot on this planet to cause all human beings to be willing to leave their bodies in that way. And, you know, you take a look at Twilight, Stephenie Meyer's film, or The Host, or a horrible recent film that is all about being possessed. I mean, actually being possessed by aliens or spirits, whatever you want to call them. Something comes in your body and becomes one with you.
I always
think,
you know,
this whole...
Yeah, meditation for me has always been the opposite. It's about coming back to your body, occupying your body, you know, just, you know, being there and not, you know, coming back to yourself and you know,
But I think it's the emptying out is what I'm referring to. It's the emptying of yourself. You know, this idea that I'm going to empty myself of all desires. I mean, that's the goal of Eastern mysticism and of Hindu and even Buddhism to some extent. Is a desire to no longer, or a goal to no longer have desires, or a goal to no longer have much of you left at all, to kind of minimize the self. And what's interesting is, as a Christian, that's also, interestingly enough, the goal of Christianity and of Christ as well, is to minimize the self and maximize the space for the Holy Spirit inside of yourself, so you're not so self-focused.
Right. When the 1% do that first, then, you know, then they can, right. When the powers that be do that first, you know, because, right, like, that's what they want the people to do. But, of course, they're doing the exact opposite so they could take you know, over you and what you don't.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Right.
Now, and let me tie this back to Google and Motorola and Regina Dugan, which is what we began with. So when they hired Regina Dugan as their head of Motorola, they also hired at around the same time Ray Kurzweil as their head of engineering. And that was a shocking choice because Ray Kurzweil is sort of a prophet for this new concept that we don't need bodies anymore, that we can merge with our machines in what he refers to as the singularity, which is this idea that there will come a point when we will become one with the whole computer infrastructure and with this imaginary world that was created through these screens, that we will upload ourselves into that matrix, as it were, or into that computer framework, and we will no longer need these packages of meat known as bodies. So we can just leave these behind because they get old and they get sick. And you can have immortality if you just upload yourself into this virtual reality existence.
Yeah, that
and
sounds
it
pretty
sounds like
scary.
science fiction, and it sounds crazy, but this guy's hardcore. And one of the things that Google is now working on is brain implants. Actual ways to put the computer inside of you. If you haven't seen it yet, you can go on YouTube and see the Verizon ad when they strap the guy down and they put the computer into his DNA. It's the Verizon DNA ad. It's shocking. They're taking him to this futuristic operating room and they strap him down and he's all happy about it. And they inject the computer into his very body. Right. And so this idea of the singularity where we merge with and become one with this technology, I think is really the end game.
Yeah,
I think that's where this is all going.
That sounds pretty scary, I would say. I mean, that's beyond any sci-fi movie I've ever seen in my life. I wanted to remind you, it's 11 minutes after the hour.
Yeah, I probably am. Yeah, I'm going to have to wrap it up, but this has really been quite a far-reaching and fascinating conversation. I appreciate your sharing your thoughts with me.
Yeah, thank you for all of your work. And, even though it is kind of a hard pill to swallow, if you swallow, just people need to just take it in a little bit at a time. And, just do it in parts that are not so overwhelming, but at least start to move in that direction. Don't turn away, because the more you turn away, the more, you're just making it easier for them to, keep doing what they're doing.
Exactly. No, and I think it's not only, there is a place for making others aware, but then there's a place of really working on yourself.
Right.
And not in a self-centered, let me focus on me kind of way, but in a way that
in a healthy way
you to become, healthier and just a better person. Right. And do the right thing.
Well, thank you so much, and we'll have you back again in the future. And how do people find you?
Well, I am one of the co-creators of StartPage.com, which is the world's most private search engine. We didn't get a chance to talk about StartPage, but if you're using these privacy-invading services, I encourage you to make the switch over to StartPage instead of Google or Bing or Yahoo. Right. Also, StartMail.com is the new private email service. It's a paid service that will be coming out next year. And people can sign up for an early access to an account at startmail.com and watch a video about it. It's fully encrypted, so it's NSA proof. Okay. And my personal website, I do a daily radio program from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern, and you can find that at kmashow.com. Those are my initials, or at KATHERINEALBRECHT.com. Okay,
well, thank you. And, hopefully we'll be able to at least put the brakes on the agenda of the elite.
Yep.
Okay, that was the end, winding down of our pre-recorded interview with Katherine Albrecht earlier today.